Aiden?
It's Aiden, yes.
Aiden Pratt.
Aiden Pratt, that's correct.
Hello,
Joe
Aiden.
Joe Nally.
This is Joe Nally,
Yeah.
otherwise known as Pilleater.
Also known as pilleater. Cool. Well, I just want to say thank you for being super responsive and getting back to me. I appreciate it.
Yeah,
I
it's
was
just a rainy Monday, so everything's in check with my end on work, so everything's good.
That's cool. Yeah, I'll introduce myself a little bit. Like, I'm no journalist. I'm not like, that. I'm just a student taking a liberal arts student taking a journalism class, and my final is to interview somebody, and I was like, I couldn't think of anybody for a while, and your page was like just kept coming up amongst like my friends, my friend group, and I just had that idea. I was like, I should reach out to this person and see if they'd be down for an interview, and
Do
here
you
we
know
are.
Beth at Parsons?
Is that a real person?
Yeah, but I won't say her name, but she
Well,
exists,
shit.
and that's a real person.
No shit. No way. I don't think I do then.
She's probably there. You might be in the same dorm, but I'm not gonna give details or anything.
Actually, I don't live in the dorms. I live in Brooklyn, but
Okay.
yeah. I mean, I guess to kind of segue into that, like, yeah, I kind of wrote up some questions, but it's kind of just a free form interview. We can just talk.
Oh yeah,
Um,
I can just introduce myself. I mean, if this isn't for a class and your professor's going to listen to it, I
mm,
might as well just say this because I've done the same journalist stuff before too.
totally.
So let me just give you an intro. My name is Joe Nally. I go by the name Pilleater on the internet. The name Pilleater was actually formed on April 5th, 2009 for a website called You're the Man Now Dog or ytmnd.com. It was supposed to be an alt account to upload Mr. Krabs memes with against Moonman, but it's became my internet persona, kind of like drill, kind of that
Yeah.
subculture from something awful, posts, some of it became, art Twitter. A lot of those people who are doing avant-garde humor later in the last 10 years,
Mm,
it's really popular now. And I guess everybody now has their honor leve type of, oh, my first novel, I wish game facts forms. People are
yeah.
obsessed with that aesthetic. And it's interesting, but as someone old enough to remember all that, it doesn't faze me because it's just, encyclopedia dramatic there and whatnot. But on my background, I actually graduated from School of Visual Arts with an MA in design research.
Mm,
And I did my master thesis on board game design, which is actually on my website, www.pilleater.com.
mm,
Um, a lot of that on my website, I just decided to congregate all my written work is because I think, we're past that age where you're some guy named Rob Smith with a website and
mm.
nobody really cares if you have your MBA from tuba playing from Rutgers. People want to know you as the artist. I remember coming across an SVA MFA called Boyd Rice Isn't Nice. And I just thought it was funny because it was just about Boyd Rice and his connections with Satanism, pop art, unpop art, and that kind of gang. And people are interested in eccentric ideals today. And especially if you're being exposed to critical theory from Timothy Morton to Eugene Thacker, I think, especially in New York City, people are looking for the artist is the intellect is the artist. And that's what people see in my art. And I'm pretty sure, on your behalf, you probably came across my Instagram page, my called Pill Eaters, which was Pill Eater. Then I added the S because I have a bunch of alt accounts, and that one just popped off because I made a meme about Save Sleazy about hipsters in Bushwick. So that's probably why you're talking to me right now.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. I mean, I I would love to begin almost with how you began making those memes, and then maybe segue into talking about your book. I have Suicidal Asian Promiscuous.
Right.
But yeah, Safe Sleazy, that character, is it
It was not Curtis
autobiographical?
Connor.
Is it? I must assume it's based off of some autobiographical stories or real life instances you had while in New York. I mean, the fact you know so much about like just different subcultures in you know
Mhm.
so the Brooklyn hipster scene is it's not as like insular as it may seem, but it's like kind of just
Yeah, I'm actually still in New York, but I
Mm,
don't really give out my location real well. But
no worries.
yeah, I mean, other than being a picture of Curtis Connor, it just works well because honestly, I had the TikTok, the YouTube, the X for the longest time. It just so happened I made an indoor joke and it got a million views on TikTok, and then people were mirroring it on the Insta, and I decided to just continue on what they would call the lore. And yeah, a lot of it is me in there, plus other people I know, and now it has became this kind of jumbotron fun yourscenesucks.com in 2025 type of ordeals. But importantly, I've been getting the criticism and accusation that I'm some evil Russian agent psychological operation, so you can read my political work on Asian American studies, which isn't true because my stuff was already well known, open, and I already had a legacy before people subscribing to me. And I think it's really unfortunate that there's a lot of normative people that subscribe to my account not knowing my brand name before assuming I'm going to be on your team and like everything. That's kind of the funny part. So I just think it's hilarious when people they never leave Instagram and they never go on
Yeah.
TikTok or X or YouTube. They just, will throw out accusations and all this stuff. And they're not getting the bigger picture in that. So again, I am not psychological operations. What I am is advertising myself as an artist. And if you want to call that psychological operations, you might as well read Gabriel Rockhill and think the CIA is behind Derrida or something. But yeah, I think I've now made, these videos daily and just
Yeah.
for fun because if you know ytmnd.com, all that was just meme posting. A lot of that is like Mr. Krabs and Moon Man, and you're just doing jokes about that stuff and trying to make people laugh. And it's just stuff like the big subculture book I like is by Dick Hebdige. He wrote a book called Subculture. He talks about how there's culture with a capital C influenced by liberal capitalist values, and then there's subculture which kind of orbits that, and there's variants of it, but it's still friendly towards the big C culture. And then there's something called counterculture, which is kind of like a comet that's about to hit the orbit. And supposedly that might move culture around, but it doesn't. It just gets commodified back into subculture. So we're in such a really eclectic time today where I can make up a character like Tenchi 12 about Gab 3, about some dude 5 years ago thinking he's an anime character, but making mumble rap and choosing and picking his curated desires and kind of not hitting the elephant in the room that has something to do with the large Asian influences from the 1980s. And and then people are just lost in this eclectic mess that people, some of the arrogant Gen X types think is like the malaise of modernity. Charles
Yeah.
Taylor, this kind of ideal that we're all free, there's no modernity. It's not a criticism of modernity. It's kind of like a liquid modernity. In other words, it's this mess of eclecticism. But I think I take the Frederick Jameson position where it's basically everything is falling apart, and so the confusion is there's no foundations anymore, and that's like shaking up the liberal ideal of the Puritan ethic. I don't know. I'm going on some ranting here, but
I know.
again,
You have to bear with me because you reference so many things, and I think that's honestly one of your biggest like strengths, and like one of the notable things I feel about your brand is pilleater is
I
you
think
have,
I'm going to give it called a theory. They call it a theory sale. That's my background is critical theory, so
yeah.
they call people who reference Lacan and Derrida and Tim Morton in the same sentence a theory sale, and I don't think that's true. I think again in the New York City art world, if you're in the Verso Loft, they want to hear what Mackenzie Wark is saying about social capital versus techno feudalism and xenofeminism. So you got to be up to date with that.
It's true.
Because these
It's true.
people are running the new school.
It's true. It's
In a
true.
very fun way. So it's fun. It's like creative writing and critical theory, and
And
I like it.
it defines the subculture too. I feel like these references to philosophers and music and even games and things like that just like define what the so-called identity of your characters and what these it's based off of real real media that like is defining the identities of today.
I'll say this before I go into my actual work. The one guy I really like is Wilhelm Flusser. He was kind of a South American guy. He wrote about does writing have a future and into the technical image. He basically argued and said that as people become post-literate and everything is just YouTube and TikTok videos, we seem to have the literacy of like an elite would have back in the 1930s, but everything is like a comic strip bubble. You hear this pretentious term going around, graphic novel. Well, what the hell is a graphic novel if you're reading a Jim Woodring comic and there's no words of English in it, and I'm just seeing these things? It's kind of like describing James Joyce's Finnegan's Wake in Chinese, right? If you know Chinese language, it's very right up front what it means. And that's really difficult to even do, to make Chinese out of Finnegan's Wake, because Finnegan's Wake was purely written in English, and that was all just collage art. But at the same time, there's this post-literacy where the image, or as Flusser says, the technical image, has more importance to it. So as someone who did YTMD art, that is now considered video art. Video art is very important that you see in like the Whitney and other places. People want to see those kind of tape loop, glitch arts. I made a video about this, Video Art Paul. I know someone like that. He's also me as 12. And everything is this kind of working with the video as the medium. It's not exactly cartooning. And, we have the technology and AI to make it more, And I think there is this kind of fad obsession with that. And the problem is, as we become more post-literate, we can't really define our own thinking and critically examine things. This is why people, if you go to college yourself, you're learning how to write, edit, speak, citate, and deliver something in your own research, your original research, what is going on. You're actually doing your own work, and you're not doing secondary sources. You're actually going to the primary text and saying, this is actually what some of the researchers are saying, and this is what's really going on. I'm not just going to say, Mark Fisher said acid communism, therefore that's correct, even though I don't understand its substance. People are too afraid to criticize, and you need to be literate for that. And I think that's actually the purpose of colleges, is to be more literate in citating research writing. And meanwhile, as we're seeing TikTok videos and whatnot of Safe Sleazy and Luna, these are all cool things, but they have no more substance other than the social status class of like Paul Fesselian middle class attempt to attract the Manhattan elite, which they're spoiled with power and they don't even care. If that makes any sense.
That does.
If anything, Safe Sleazy is a part of my life. It's not just Curtis Connor. Luna's a real character. The Brown Guy's a real character. It kind of is a animated Sunday morning cartoon using AI and buddy pictures like Marxist situationist art, and then people laughing because I said Atari Teenage Riot without any substance of it. I guess I'm old enough to know what that is. But here's the funny part. You could have some 19-year-old, 22 kid watching my video, and in the same video, they're learning about Realicide and Tony Negri and Empire in the same video. And now they're going to listen to Realicide and pick up this book, Empire, and be like, wow, I've learned something new today. It isn't just funny because it's ironic and we're laughing at what these people do, but I want to become it in a weird Rene Girardi and Mnemonic Desire way. If that makes any sense.
No, that makes a lot of sense. It's almost like, I feel like you really are like creating almost like a new subculture in itself, like from a lot of just like the character development of of these people. It's awesome. I do like it.
Again, all I am is a harmless, edgy Asian studies major that got way too much in critical theory, joined a Marxist group, was kicked from the Marxist group, joined some other radical parties and was kicked out. And pretty much I think for my own. I don't join other parties and let them dictate. I just, like an eclectic collage, pick what I want. And because I was such a passionate Asian studies major at Temple University a long time ago, I just think, well, this is what I love, what can I do to more further it? And then all of a sudden you're reading Nick Land, and Nick Land is making a post-Marxist criticism against David Harvey's time and space compression and making it something about Saturn eating people, and why, accelerationism is here because you read it from a science fiction novel by Roger Zelazny. And then it's like, well, you can have a little fun with this. And I think this is the fun part about critical theory, is that it's creative writing mixed with these, instead of the utility of teaching about people about, Heidegger or something, what you're doing is you're taking these terms and then you're creative writing books as if it was Isaac Asimov in the 1960s or something. And I think you're seeing that there with channels like Theory Underground and funny stuff like that, and people are having fun with the internet stuff, and that's why I think people find them controversial. It's like, well, if you talk about race, well, that's a big icky subject because we're in a liberal society. Everybody can be treated the same. However, I think it's also important to talk about race because, again, it has a lot to do with the liberal construct and what's really going to happen. For example, you mentioned my book, Suicidal, Asian, or Promiscuous. Oh, that's funny. I had a girlfriend, and she bought my book, and she's like, I absolutely adore your book, so whenever I bring back a hinge date, it's right on my kitchen table. And I'm like, what are you into? Oh, it's this big blue book. It says Suicidal, Asian, Promiscuous. That must mean you. She does hit me up, so that's why I think it's funny. But no, I'm that kind of person that likes Alain de Botton and things like The School of Life and things like Emile Durkheim and Max Weber. And so in this book, it's like, well, I believe there's this drive where we are suicidal, like Emile Durkheim's concept, where within modernity, people become suicidal because there's no sense of the collective. If white is a social construct, so is Asian. You're not Chinese, Korean, Japanese. You're just a Malays of Asian, whatever that is. Yep. And promiscuous, because in this Andrea Dworkin way, there's all these types of whoring going on. You can't even settle to start families or have natalism or children because you're just a whore to live in New York City. And that destroys and creates the suicidal condition. And it's also a funny pun because I guess every person I ever loved was suicidal, Asian, and promiscuous. But other than that being this little avant-garde Wyndham Lewis Art of Being Ruled type of book or essay collection, I try to make it as just, if I was telling intellects or, postgraduate school, look at this book I have, look, as Richard Wolff would say, look how white and shiny my teeth are. Can I come to the new school?
Yeah.
The point is, though, it's having fun with it. And so in that book, I really have, this eclectic mix of talking about games, about my foundations, about Asian studies, things I've learned in college. And I think what's funny is that the people who read my meme page think I'm like hiding this stuff. And it's like, well, it's right over there when I begin with the highest priority, thinking about desires and then going to anti-liberalism. It should be obvious by the second point that it's like, I don't like liberals. And I think there's a transhumanist ideal going on to like eliminate the world with the trying to form the singularity and having solidarity with non-humankind so they can kill everyone. Again, it sounds schizophrenic like a Philip K. Dick novel. It's actually not. They're actually talking about this in like the weird Peter Singer type.
I'm not sure if you're referencing the other Instagram account, Tablet Muncher, which I know you might have seen, but like I as soon as I've read your book, I've read almost excerpts from your book, but I do have it next to me right now, Suicidal, Asian, Promiscuous. And going back to Tablet Muncher's page, is just like, it seems like they're not really well researched into kind of who you are as a person.
I mean, I don't know who that person is. I'm pretty sure I was told some person on the Red Scare podcast. And remember, I'm going to tell you this. Red Scare podcasts are basically anti-liberal Republicans who are pretending to be Marxist. Dasha and that gang, they're basically what you would call the dirtbag left, and I was associated with the dirtbag left. My downstairs neighbor was Alex Gendler. He was dating Amber Frost, okay? I went to DSA meetings, and and this was before Hassan, okay? And before Bausch. These people would just be like, we're leftists, but we're based, and we're red pill. We know what race is. We know men and women are different. We can do all these things that make us look like skinheads, but we're actually not. That was really popular in 2017. Yeah. And today it's kind of malaised and forgotten. Those people moved on. And for people like Tablet Muncher, I don't even know who this person is. It's just like I call it the fan club. And the fan club is just like, let's expose this evil racist and make sure the Antifa gets them. But it's like, well, Antifa was a Gen X thing. It's a hardcore punk. And I knew some of those people like Paul Milton in Philadelphia. And it turns out he was a skinhead. Actually, it's weird because Philly Antifa already written me up all the way back in 2017 when I'd be hanging with the Kekastanis. So it's kind of bizarre. I don't know if Tablet Muncher knows that information. I tried to reach out, nothing, because, again, I think that person, I've heard accusations that this is a mentally unstable person who works on Red Scare. And if you're not in Dasha's fan club, whatever. But, I blocked that person because that's slander. It's not who I am. Especially these accusations. Well, you attended Unite the Right. Well, yeah, I attended Unite the Right with the Kekastanis, these kind of libertarian, and we didn't know Heather Heyer would die and that there was going to be violence outspoken. It was rather just a meeting. Both left and far right were there. And I was shaking hands with Augustus Sol Invictus, a Satanist lawyer. You have to understand the Discordian Satanist and Discordian intentions in this party, kind of like the Process Church. This is like people in industrial music like this, and I associate with industrial music. And honestly, those generations are changing, and people can't divide performance art from its thou, because guess what? Everyone on the far right hated me. There's this guy who's saying Asian Aryan, and that should already be a contradiction in the text. How can you be an Asian Aryan? An Aryan has blue eyes, blonde hair, and the Wignat type, those are like the hardcore white nationalists. They're like, well, we don't believe in race mixing. If they were Asian, you're going to be Elliot Rodgers and kill up the place. Elliot Rodgers, suicidal Asian promiscuous, So, again, both the left and right hate me, and they seemingly are not getting the trope. And listen, if you attend a post-Marshall industrial meeting with legitimate gay white nationalists who are fans of Boyd Rice, that is considered cool to some sects of Bushwick. But they kept it a secret for a very long time, where they like the edginess of it. And now the dirtbag left is onto it. If you're a leftist and you listen to Come Town and you kind of like Dasha, that's now cool. That wasn't cool 8-7 years ago. So I'm telling you, now you have Frank Hassel from MDE loving Deaf in June. If Deaf in June was to come in tomorrow, he will sell out a show at Brooklyn Steel, right? Dead Can Dance was about to play at Radio City Music Hall. Everyone knows who goes sees Dead Can Dance are Deaf in June, industrial, totalitarian aesthetics fans. But you know what? Deaf in June's not playing in New York because of COVID and because they don't believe in the vax. Yeah, they're politically incorrect. But that's the whole point. You have sects like these, and people seemingly are messing up the subcultures. And for people who are slandering, they're not getting the bigger picture, where it's like, dude, Asian Aryan, that's kind of funny. And I made a website back then pretending I was this kind of screw tape letter dictator of sorts, saying, what would the society envision? And that goes along with, I would say, they're already planning an Asian Aryan society now. Now, it's kind of being satirical, but it's also true. If under multiculturalism, we're told all races are the same, well, how come under the objective supply and demand cycles, white men are getting with Asian women, and are they having Eurasian children? They can't just be all Elliot Rodgers. They're going to be buying up the suburbs and starting families, and everyone's going to be half Asian. And this is the ideal of not being called white, because if you're white, then everyone hates you. And if you're Asian, well, you're no longer white, but you can have the white standards. So what's going on here? We're having this kind of Big Hero 6, Turning Red, Molly McGee and the Ghost Disney Asianism that the elites are gladly enjoying. In fact, there's a new Nickelodeon cartoon coming out, SVA people, called The Wild Pack. This white guy who has a Korean wife, and they have a half Korean daughter and a white adopted kid who's speaking Korean. That is the perfect society to live in LA. And I like it so much. And the character Luna, that's a picture of Sienna Hong. That's Tim Biskup's ex-wife. And I think it's funny nobody ever come down to that, because Sienna Hong is producing that new Nickelodeon cartoon show. And again, I'm embracing this Eurasian futurism, but the hardcore liberal is looking the other way.
Right. Well, yeah, you just gave me so much to delve into, but
yeah, tell that to your professor. So,
and yeah, Asian Aryanism is honestly, I mean, when I first saw it, it was like, what could it be talking about? But when I read your book and I understood that, like, Asian as a culture and not a race, it started, honestly, like, make so much more sense to me about how we treat, what is white, what is a minority, what is, how do we use those terms in now of anything? It's just
right.
it's
Well,
cool.
I just wanted to go back on that. So my studies, I think around 2016, when I was finishing up English at Rosemont College, which is now a satellite campus of Villanova. It's a part of Villanova University now, and I was going to Villanova as well. My BA was about the far right. It was called the alternative right, as a warning against liberalism. And I was going to far right gatherings with Richard Spencer and Greg Johnson and doing a liberal journalist piece. And guess what? The Atlantic even called me and said, can we use some of your research for our stuff? And this is before the Unite the Right. In fact, I remember clearly, which solidified my thesis, is when Hillary Clinton had her speech in Reno, Nevada about the alternative right. It wasn't called alt-right. We said the full name, the alternative right. And at that time, I felt like Hillary Clinton really validated what I was doing, because when I was doing this at Villanova, people were not getting it. I'm like, you don't understand. This isn't like Klansmen or anything. It's more like an intersectionality of like post-neoconservative type of anti-liberalisms that intersect and they all shake hands. And that's exactly, and as somebody would go in there, I would just ask questions where, well, how can you be gay and be a homo nationalist? Or how can you believe in this aesthetic and make it like this? And that was in a very exciting time before Donald Trump was ever elected, at the end of Obama's, and I remember it clear this day. And that interest, I've always had a fascination with the far right, whether you want to say it is in the ill-attempt Spencer Sunshine saying that the far right is somehow violent and evil or not. It's just because it is a criticism of the liberal structure, and that's a very popular topic. But I just wanted to get back into the topic and say, because I was an Asian studies major, and before there was even a term incel made up, there was a group on Reddit called r/HAPA. And on this group, there were this guy named Eurasian Tiger, a supposed guy, Spencer whatever, who graduated from Harvard University and said, oh, I'm a byproduct of white male Asian female. I want to kill myself. And anybody who's a white male Asian female should die. And it was this pre-incel ranting of similar Asian American men, young men, who just blamed all their problems on white men taking the stock of what was left of, again, Asian women. Not Korean, not Chinese, just Asian in general. It could be Cambodian, right? And they would always, and then when Roger Elliott's came out, they would accelerate it. And even though Roger Elliott's was like British, Malaysian adopted, they're starting to blame all Chinese, all Japanese. And I just felt like this was such a problem and that the liberal system was eating this up. And so I was interviewing people like Eurasian Tiger, and then, Asian Aryanism was this kind of punk rock prank against them to create their anxiety, and it worked and it baited. There were some other people who was in that movement too, like the Hapatarian and his wife Nico, or the Forgotten Nationalist, who's Vietnamese in LA. There was also Roaming Millennial, who became Lauren Chen. She was talking to the gay white nationalist Greg Johnson in 2016. I just think that's funny, and so you might find some of my old stuff where, pilleater was pranking them. Now, there is this weird accusation that's on that person's channel, Tablet Muncher, who's saying that I am Asian girl for white God. I know her in person, okay? And she worked in the adult industry, and we've met up. And people say, oh, pilleater's a weird guy that role plays this. No, it's not. I was not doing it. I was talking to people like Asian Girl for iPod. I knew Saya Song, Lydia Linder, before she OD'd in 2023. I've known some of these people in the adult industry, and they're the most fascinating people you'll meet in Mood Ring, Bushwick, Brooklyn. And some of those people are in front of their computers in Ohio, and they're not understanding what's really going on here. And it's sad some of them are dead, or they have to go the other way because they have this mythos of pointing fingers at the deleted Eurasian, right? So this is what they want to do. They don't want the existence of Eurasianism because it's complicated for the left, because you're fetishizing it, that you're fixating on something that doesn't have a soul. We're not the same. Why does this matter? Do you believe in supreme values? And we have the right saying this weird solipsism and Malthusian degrowth population that's saying, well, we shouldn't have Eurasian children because they don't have an enemy and they're going to kill people. And so both left and right, these constructs made up by white people, are saying Eurasianism is bad, even though Eurasian women today represent the best virtue ethics and choices in a crazy society when all the white women are blue-haired feminists destroying everything and saying we're all the same. In a hectic society where, the sexual hierarchy is going nuts and these kind of Patrick Bateman are having the harem of these women. Well, decent men want to start families and promote natalism of sorts. And that's now being taken away into the malaise of go cure yourself, social Darwinian Malthusianism. And that was not being told on r/HAPA. It was not being told in the far right, not in the far left. And so what I do is I'm kind of criticizing this. And listen, just to add up really quickly, the incel Asian American has evolved to people like Douglas Kim. Douglas Kim is a hardcore tanky advocated by Caleb Maupin of the CPI American Communist Party, right? I was a part of CPI for a bit. And Douglas Kim is saying white male, Asian female is a fascist capitalist construct. And by supporting Asian male, white female, you're supporting the DPRK motherland and communist values. That doesn't make any sense because you're still going to have Eurasian children, even with an Asian patriarchy. And to downplay it is just, and guess what? Liberals eat it up because they hate white men. And if liberals eat it up because they hate white men, it destroys the values of the dirtbag left and some of that kind of Hassan. And I love Hassan, by the way, and all this stuff, energy going on right now. And so and guess what? Douglas Kim is mentally ill. He did acid. And so you can't trust him as an agent. But it's there. I've written about it before. I've written criticism. It's also in my book as well. But it shows you that Douglas Kim is on this campaign to call it a white male, Asian female mind virus. Like he's like talking like he's Foucault. Yeah. And I said, you're not Foucault. Okay, you can't call Asian sexuality virus. Again, it's this intellectual jujitsu. And Caleb Maupin, quote, said he's a great man. So where's the conspiracy here that even the far left circles, the tanky circles, they're saying white male, Asian female is bad? And so, again, I think we're in a very weird time where you have the rhizomic happenstance of Douglas Kim, and I might as well be that processed church Jim Goad prankster and say, well, Kim, I guess I am a mind virus, and I'm here to destroy your party. And that's what I do as a post-Asian American studies advocate.
There was a quote from your book that I enjoyed. It's the fetish as a manifestation of desire, and I think that's just very... it can explain that. White and male,
I just want to say really quick that a fetish is irrational. A fetish must mean that it's irrational and you're fixated on something, right? All desires are rational. If you desire something like, going outside, having ice cream, those are rational. This is what the Christian philosopher Alvin Plantinga said to justify the belief in God. Because I have positive experiences and knowing well that external people believe in God, against solipsism, that all desires are rational. Well, again, you can't call a desire if you're gay and you love another man, you're a homosexual, you can't call that irrational because your desire is saying it is rational to love a man for who he is. I mean, Jack Donovan wrote this in Angiophile about taking back gay culture for masculine men, right? The only thing you can call it on the grounds as irrational is not having children. So there's this accusation that having a fetish is irrational to the liberal world because it objectifies people and doesn't see them as a soul. No, it's not. Because again, you can't call something that a desire is, or if a desire is rational, it can't be irrational. It's like, and another thing I wanted to add on, sorry, I'm all over the place, but like having a fixation, right, is the goal you have in mind. It doesn't make you weird. I mean, the word nerd refers to your obsession with something. You could be a Star Trek nerd, a Star Wars nerd, a nerd about Android Netrunner, whatever. You have a fixation on it. It's the hobby that makes you into like anything from modular synthesizers and create an industry out of it. And how do you explain things like Giant Robot Magazine, Amped Asia, Juxtapose Magazine, all about Asian American culture? These are fixations. These are rational desires about these things. And so it should be a nice, welcoming thing when somebody outside, black, white, whatever, says, hey, I'm really into Asian culture. How can I assimilate, right? That's why we have people like Donald Keene, or even Jared Taylor, who learns Japanese. Donald Keene assimilated, but, Jared Taylor has his own thing going on. Point in being is that you have to have that gate opened for assimilation to happen. There's these weird binary constructs. But anyway, it's kind of like when it's manifest, it's more like a muse you have. Yeah. And I think the muse is what creates art, especially that if you have a piece of clay and you're making the body Adonis out of it, right? And this is kind of like it's teaching art. It has to be a reflection of beauty and values of it. And people think there's ugliness or something. And it's like, well, if the political regime is liberal and they think like people who objectify and you believe in middle class values of supremacy, they like to say. These are, again, these words that you're throwing around. They don't make any sense because you're describing what beauty is. There are men who become Buddhists. The story goes that the white boy from Kentucky runs off to Japan because it's a G7 nation and finds a Japanese girl happily ever after. So many cases like that. But the problem is there's no dialogue on it. And that number is going to get bigger when you keep saying demonize, because the word fetish is just like racist. And by the way, the guy who made up the word racist was a German Swiss guy who had a Chinese boyfriend, right? He was saying the word racism to define his Asian sexual homo relationship with a Chinese boy or Chinese guy. I'm sorry, but I'm just saying it relates back to this. And a little digging. What I mean to say is that I don't mean to say that they're rational is rational. I mean to say is that all desires are rational, and that you can't call something a fetish. Because when you call something a fetish, you're saying it's irrational. And I just wanted to make that very clear. So,
heads up. So apparently my Zoom is
in 5 minutes. I saw that. If you want to restart,
we could restart. I'd be down to restart if that's all right with you.
So let's restart, and then we get another 30 minutes.
Got you.
Sorry.
No, you're good.
Just send me the link.
Yeah, I'll send you the link.
Okay, are we back
Yeah,
on?
we're back on. Sorry about that.
Yeah, just go off from there and then cut the tape from there and just keep going. So,
Yeah. Some some more things I wanted you I was like gearing up to ask you. I know we kind of got interrupted, but
mm,
your chapter on electronic music, I was wondering if you could elaborate more on those classifications that you wrote up in, such as the streamer, the programmer, the performer, kind of the distribution of electronic music and how you think that's changing right now and how that's affected, honestly, mainstream
oh
culture.
God. Well, it's funny you're changing up the topic. I mean, it's my background, it's my profession, it's
Mm-hmm.
actually what I do and work as an independent contractor, and some other things I won't get into. But yeah, other than, just before I go into it, um, if you have a veterinarian and your veterinarian helps your dog or your cat, and then you figure out that your veterinarian is a gay white nationalist, you say, wow, my veterinarian was a gay white nationalist and he helped cure my dog. I can't hate him anymore. This kind of ideal is what Harvey Milk would say about how when gay people would run for office in San Francisco, that if gay people were do ethics or have show virtue, people would downplay that they were gay or a gay white nationalist, something so controversial, and just realize that the values you do are more important. So I say the same thing about myself is that, well, why is Joe talking about Asian studies? I think he's problematic, but no, he's talking about electronic music now. Because again, if you're in graduate school and whatever, you want to speak on science things and whatnot. But again, my background, I love electronic music. I never was a guy that played guitar or bass. My parents wanted me to go to Berkeley School of Music, and had calluses on my fingers playing sitar.
Mm-hmm.
I thought I could play tabla. I was in really Asian studies stuff, even in music. But I like synthesizers and drum machines more because that's what my brother liked, and I thought it was about composition than it was about performing. Performing, you could be like David Bowie, whatever, you're handsome. But electronic music, it's computer music. You can do something and write on it, and it's about the constructs of music that you do, just like writing a novel and things like that.
Yeah.
So when I wrote that article, What Went Wrong with Electronic Music, I actually intended it to write for a webzine called Fisted by Foucault. I think Fisted by Foucault is still around. It's some guy, he's in New York too, and he
Yeah,
liked it.
they are still around. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, yeah. He liked it, and he said, "Can you give some thoughts on it?" And honestly, it was, working in the industry of it, which, I'm very quiet about. I just wanted to do something on it because, when I started up my Substack, which became my website, I wanted to be like a longer ideal. And this article actually, I took pride of it when I first published it because it was that stupid Google doodle of Avassi or whatever, and was like, when is the Silicon Valley elite is celebrating this young kid who was suicidal, and just was like, well, I guess there's this American liberal message that if you make music in FL Studios, you'll hit it big. Maybe, maybe not, but it's all content, isn't it? And so I remember a time when electronic music, and my friend remembers this too, where it was very hobbyist. It wasn't this thing where they called it electronic dance music, like it's this big corporate music thing. There was this kind of side of the world where you had this white kid out in Ohio making like tracker music or something, and like .xm files or something, and messing
Mm.
around with MIDI. So you got the very technical aspect. This is where the word like IDM comes from, intelligent dance music, where you have some English kid in Leeds doing this stuff. And I understand there's things like house music and garage and Miami bass. Remember, that's the club scene, right? We're talking about. And a lot of those people, by the way, were into things like Kraftwerk and kind of the early industrial music. So I'm more focused on hobbyism, of like, that's why I kind of changed up the term What Went Wrong, hobbyist electronic music, and where there's the blunt term of it. Because today, electronic music is just content. If you open up Reason 13, even FL to some extent, it seems like I'm working with an advanced podcasting program with some special effects. You'll
Yeah.
have hyper pop musicians like Two Hollis, where you can get AI and get all the generic cliches, what's hip, what's in,
Yeah.
and it's not really you. It's it just becomes a wallpaper of sound, and that's where we get these eclecticism in. And even like people like Jacques Derrida has the audacity to say, well, hauntology is in electronic music.
Mm.
And I just think that's a little absurd. It's not understanding what's really going on here. Because again, electronic music, if you're really into it, you synthesize sounds, you work in things like Max 9, you working in C sound and all that stuff. And I think people have lost that edge because people want to be near synthesizers and drum machines and perform. But it's became a social status symbol, and it's kind of a cliche here. And listen, I'm guilty of myself. If you bring your Hinge date at Mr. Kiwi and you're back at the Willoughby place and be like, oh, what's this? This is a Eurorack. I came across one funny, hilarious meme about a year ago, and I'm trying to find it. It's like an Asian girl is in this room with a white guy. I'm like, this guy is such a dork. He's talking about a low pass filter, but it's happening, and they're both in the same room together, and that's attractive. And I think it's an engineering thing. It could have been anything. It could have been about toy trains or something. But it's a nice little way of. It's not pretentious, but it's certainly the manifestation of the artist trying to build something. And I do see a lot of that cliches with a lot of coming to age kids being like, let's get vintage gear and do this, but let's hate Uri Benninga because he's a sellout. And it's kind of the same Christian Lander stuff white people like ideals that are invading the text, where it's more about owning things like, $200 Supreme clothes than it is about, you as a musician, right?
Totally.
I just saw my friends in Long Island City play their like fun KMFDM pig bands, and I'm like, that's cool, you're performing, and it's a finessing with B&H cameras and whatnot. But if I was like to sit down with you right now and like plug in a bunch of synthesizers, and I did this in San Francisco, and just for 10 minutes show you this weird piece I made, I don't think people are going to dance to it because I'm composing like I'm Beethoven or something. And so that's the beautiful part about electronic music, is that people are undermissing the value that you can actually compose things with it, like you're writing a novel. I mean, this is, again, IDM, Square Pusher, Aphex Twin, really nitty-gritty stuff. And I know, I'm going to use the term, Aphex Twin is a gear fetishist. Not that it's, if you want to call it irrational or not, I would say you're giving power to something. You're giving power to Roland TB-303 because you like the sound of it. But it's like, and that's why Acid House, it could be an SH-101, but they like the TB-303, whatever. It's like, it's these eclecticisms you're hearing, but it's like, now it's getting so mixed up that, I'm listening to a song by Two Hollis about jeans, and it's this guy where it's like, what is this? It's like Basement Jacks and Footwork, and then it breaks down into a Jersey Club song with this and that. It's like this multi-genre attack that we're seeing, that which technology can give, but it has to be more than that. And that's why I think I'm trying to get at with the article.
Right.
And again, like with Polyend, I have a Polyend tracker, and I'm thinking to myself, well, you have Pete Cannon. Oh, it's the whole drum and bass English subculture. I'm like, no, Pete Cannon is an actor, a performance of it, and they're not really using Amiga 500s anymore, or an the technology Octamed to make drum and bass. It's too old. But to have a new computer to look like an Amiga, it's kind of like this irony of sorts. I think there was a guy named M25 or whatever. He was recently at Bossa Nova, and this kid's like, oh, I'm in China Melville, and I skateboard like Larry Clark Kids, and I have 2 Polyend trackers because, the subculture. And I'm like, no, that's not subculture. That's like a performance art. You might as well be on an OnlyFans or something. And yeah, I just feel like we have so much liberating technology today, but like the reason why you have genres like Vaporwave and like people like Wolf OSX or something, they're more about performance than they are about construction. I remember a time when you just had like things like Depeche Mode or OMD or, things like that, where there was synth pop or new wave. And I just wrote that as a fun little jab on it, and just to say, where's my people?
I completely understand what you're saying. And it's like the aesthetics of the music are just kind of zombified, like we're carrying on like, and it has lost a lot of like the ethos that I feel like.
It's okay to listen to new music. There's a lot of new music I like, but then I just ask, where's the values? Because the same with book. It's happening in literature too. And we're going back to post-literacy, right? The whole thing, in Safe Sleazy memes, I joke about alt-lit, right? What the hell is alt-lit? Well, I guess in the 2000s, there were a lot of unpublished guys, and the whole ideal that you get published on Grove Press, and you're writing something new. Everybody was like, there's this youth using the correct word, youth fetishism in the American literati, where they believe like, oh, you're young and you're free and you're hedonistic and you're evil. And this kind of Jack Kerouac, William Burroughs obsession really never left. You see in the work of Kathy Acker. Dennis Cooper seems to be a big boss of this. And, it seems like, as people don't know how to write, they want to make like they want to make the same thing, like it's this collage art, this Little Caesar magazine thing of living their life. I'm trying to live my best life, and you see this through the subcultures. You get too visual, where it's like Sam Pink, where it's like, I'm not really reading something using the English language. I'm just reading poetry. You see this in the work of Alex Kazemi with New Millennial Boys, where, you get a piece of glue on a piece of paper and you throw the rainbow sprinkles on the glue, and it's like, yes, Mountain Dew, yes, KMFDM, whatever. What all these things mean? It's funny you said it. And I'm guilty of that too with the whole meme stuff. But if our literature is just objects and objects of saying these things, there's no consistency to these objects other than what they're saying. I mean, Gertrude Stein and Tender Buttons tried to write poetry without referencing nouns, because nouns are just 7-Up, McDonald's, and I'm, again, guilty of collage art, and it's okay to practice, but that's kind of what's in today with alt-lit. And you get to a point where it's like, the heaviest type you can go to is like looking at art. So we're more visual than we are reading it. And that's why like Dennis Cooper will do like Zach's Haunted House, which is basically a web page of gifs and he likes, and it's cool for a bit, but it's literally like video art and curation. And here we are back at the center of the Ouroboros. And again, not saying it's not a bad medium to work with, but it's like we have to admit that like people are not writing academic texts like they are, and we're rather obsessed with like pretty objects and like Honor Levy's My First Novel, and it's very shallow, and we're not really, and that's why I read critical theory and novels, because I guess I'm a big boy now and I need someone to explain it in perfect academic English what's really going on, and instead of showing me a pretty book you published. And guess what? The publishing industry now is monopolized by Jeff Bezos, okay? A publishing book place like a thin press of anxiety, it's just some dude who has 20 ISBN numbers, will curate and like what he likes and take all your money and then give you fame in return. I've seen this with all the alt-lit presses like Expat Press or whatever. They try to say, oh, we're making the best curation, but really what's happening is that it's nepotism. They're choosing their favorite people who shook this hand because maybe 3 steps ahead, they will meet Dennis Cooper or Bret Easton Ellis in person, and then they get a Hollywood deal, and it's really vague because we're losing the sense of the artist and writing who you are. And again, the English medium today, it's very selective to who is writing about what, and really they're negating the medium in favor of something else, because there's so much you can do with English that we're kind of reaching its end, and I guess people call it slop now. Again, I'm not saying you should write books with English. I think English is a wonderful thing, but keep in mind when you write in English, you're thinking really in a different part of the brain and writing about something. And most English today that helps people is philosophy and things like that, not just pretty pictures, because you might as well be painting.
You mentioned in your book how music is almost like the supreme hyper object of subculture. And I feel like I really resonate with that and it kind of goes back to like a bit of like the beauty, like the beautiful image thing, like, but almost in like a very like specific way, like how music can be the image of the subculture. Or I'm sorry, I'm a bit lost.
I love music. I mean, well, I think here's the thing. I think music is a natural human thing. I mean, this is kind of a neuroscientological thing, but I might chopping the words there, but music is natural. It doesn't matter what you play. There's, if you give someone a drum or a flute, they're going to play on it no matter what your skill set is about music. And, this is why I wouldn't get stressed out when some kid is like, I went to Berkeley and I could play the bass guitar for my hardcore band, because everybody wants to start a hardcore band, even though they don't know how to play instruments. Could be like Green Jello, whatever. Could be like Treasure Mammal. I don't know. But when people get around to play music, it's a very intimate experience, like playing board games with each other at board game night. And I think a lot of people have lost that connection. And that's why it's really difficult to talk about electronic music with people, because technology is rapidly changing. People still think it's like, here's your drum set, here's your bass, playing the right note. And that's why I think noise music is so liberating, because with noise, they just want to make noise as expression. I'm really obsessed with the work right now of Brian Eno's new book, What Art Does. And he just comes to the conclusion where it's like, well, it is expression. And how we express things is very weird, because the way people express stuff, and again, it's a very life coachy Deepak Chopra book. It's really corny. But he's saying that, besides the corniness, he's really getting to point by saying, well, people are expressive, and the way the medium you find expressive is something you're not thinking about right now. And he jumps to the conclusion, and I think he cites Jesper Jewell and says, we're creating worlds here. I don't agree with that part. I mean, it's a very politician type of way, but it's an interesting to think about because when people make, noise music or things like that, they are trying to curate aesthetic or expression they couldn't do if they knew English, right? Somebody might say something else with the medium that they have. And so these different types of mediums are, people will find their niching. A woman might be knitting all the time. She'll be knitting Cthulhu dolls or whatnot, and that's the way she does. And people never saw that medium before. And again, the whole ideal of painting or cartooning, which SVA is known for, that's going out of style as people are going to AI, and so they have to teach something else like computer arts and keep up to date with how technology is rapidly evolving. And so again, I think people, and especially in the music realm, yes, I think pop music is the best form of music, but it is a skill set. You have to learn music theory and whatnot and what people like, and people find avenues of way. For Sasha Konietzko's case, him doing krautrock music in the mid 80s and then finding sampling in guitars and eventually doing KMFDM is a long road to especially make an album every year, every other 2 years, and see that evolutionary process. That's like my that's why I love, KMFDM is my favorite group of all time. But, you see that in the work. And I think, if people are more open-minded about creating art instead of being very judgmental, he can't play drums or whatever, I think music, everyone finds their own niche. And I think, again, and one more other thing I would like to bring up, Mark Hollis of Talk Talk. There's a wonderful biography by Ben Wardle, A Perfect Silence, about the life of Mark Hollis. It just came out last year. There's also the movie In a Silent Way, which is about the life of the band Talk Talk. So Mark Hollis, Paul Webb, Lee Harris, and what Mark Hollis was really about. He was really just a reclusive guy. He wrote this kind of Depeche Mode-esque single, It's My Life, but got more introverted, wrote these really weird albums. His solo album from 98, Nobody Understood. And he was just a recluse, but you hear those albums again, they have high replay value. The way he thinks about music, the way he thinks about meditation and all that actually inspires me. In fact, I did a little meme. I said, good sleazy. Well, if Safe Sleazy is so bad and so he's evil, well, what does good sleazy look like? He's probably thinking that Mark Hollis is his life coach or something, and he's happily married to a Japanese woman who does indie. I'm pretty sure you have that a lot in Brooklyn. But the point is, they're willing to not say that because they have a good life. Why would you get rid of the good life if, it calls you in trouble? And so I just think, if anything, Mark Hollis would be that ideal way of living a life. And I love, it's on my website too. I got some of his transcripts and been reading it. And so when I make art, I think of the way Mark Hollis thinks about, right? And I try to incorporate that in my own music. But yeah, I would say music is natural. It's a good thing, and we can learn a lot from it.
Yeah, would you like to talk about your most recent album? What's the name of it?
Oh, it's just electronics. Yeah.
Electronics, yes. What instruments were you using?
Okay, well, it's funny because honestly, I haven't had a cassette in 4 years because I still have my other cassettes. I sold them, and I just earlier this year I was just, well, why don't I make a compilation of the music I like that I made and just introduce it with my name, my phone number, my email, and just give it out to people and be like, if you want to work together, here. It's like a portfolio card, and that's what I did. You think with the Instagram page, people would just buy my album. Only 3 people did. With 34,000 people, only 3 people bought it, and I have 50 more copies left. And I'm like, God damn it! Music business is harder than I think, and I just have 60 copies here. But anyway, yeah, because again, I don't want to be just known as Safe Sleazy. It's kind of like Wolf Eyes. I don't know if you follow Wolf Eyes. The guy there, he had their noise band, but guess what? Wolf Eyes got really big because he made a meme page about goofy music, like putting Bernie Sanders to 311. Haha, that's funny. But the point is, it's to sell more Wolf Eyes records. Yeah. And I guess that's where the market is right now, is making meme pages and be like, oh, who's Joe Nally? Oh, he's actually a musician. He works with electronic music. Can you buy my K? Think of that. Oh, he's a scary racist doing psychological operations. Let's boycott him. No, it doesn't work like that. It's not, see, this is like a Trotskyist mindset, and they don't understand. But the point is, that album, I'm guilty of the Mark Hollis type. I love, again, Berlin School. I don't care. Kanye West wrote a tweet, and he said that if you're into shoegaze in Berlin School, you're a cuck. I don't believe that. I love Berlin School tapes. I love krautrock. kind of the old synth pop stuff, huge fan of Kraftwerk, all that stuff. And, I have my Eurorack system and it's a bunch of electronics. I mean, kind of like Boards of Canada here. I don't want to give everything out and not tell you that's a SH101 or something like that, but it's there. And I think that's an expression. I think the music speaks for itself. You don't need any other magical power for it. And if you have a cassette deck in this mod day and age, I know everything's digital and I give it out for free. It's cool to have a cassette or a vinyl record or an 8-track or whatever, or a CD in your living room, and you have an intimate experience it, like Plato or Socrates talking to Alcibiades, and where the term philos comes about. Yeah. So again, I think it's there. My full name is there. I'm just a normal guy. I'm not hiding anything from you. And if you like synthesizers, it's there. Give it a listen.
Sounds great. I'm also in a, somewhat of a scene of music in which everyone has a 4-track recorder. I'm recording a little bit on cassette right now, and it's funny that you're talking about going back to, or like, getting into old analog gear, hardware, that gear fetishism or whatever, but
I'm guilty of it myself.
It's as long as it's there and you really do have a relationship with it, it can be liberating, I think.
I mean, I used a Moog Prodigy. Oh my God, Moog. Some people say Moog. It's Moog, not Moog. I joked about a video being like, I've known someone who got mad because I would say Moog, like a Bostonian, and they were like, no, it's Moog, like a rogue. And I'm like, no, it's, but anyway.
It's Moog.
I had a Prodigy and I sold it, but I just wanted it because it was a Prodigy and I liked the sound of it because I had the access to it, and the ideal that, there's this whole bohemian lifestyle, this David Brooks, Bobo in Paradise ideal that you're at your Bushwick place and you have the plants and you set up the synthesizers and you have the funny animated movie on the projector wall and you get beat stuff, and it's a nice little environment like Fort Thunder or Big Rock Candy Mountain, and that's a very liberals like the word safe space. It can be a safe space if you know what you're doing. It's not like a anarchist crust punk bullshit thing. There's standards, right? And those standards, like you're seeing this in Meow Wolf. Meow Wolf is this corporate thing. There's going to make a Meow Wolf in New York City. And basically that all comes from Fort Thunder in Providence, Rhode Island. Philly had Big Rock Candy Mountain, the trunk space in Phoenix. It'll come back to me wherever. But yeah, Meow Wolf is the accumulation of that kind of fun house, James Turrell type of thing where the environment matters and you as a free spirit, fucking cuddle and watch Pat DeLeo and all that fun stuff and just talk about life. And that seemingly is what people desperately want, but they don't know how to get it. And so they just become ironic. And again, I think irony is ultimately bad. As much as I'm being ironic by telling jokes, to be hyper aware about everything doesn't get to intimacy or philios. And so, I think I agree with this with Umberto Eco in his afterword for The Name of the Rose, where under modernity, people have became so individualized where instead of thinking about the community, people are afraid to commit. So if you say back then, if you go, I love you, it's a commitment, we have a duty, that's great. But today, because everyone's individualized, they have to think about it. If you call someone, you say you love them, then they're like, oh, I got to think about the implications that you're loving me. So the way to get love across is that you have to go outside the text and be like, paraphrase here, like Daniel Steele would say, I love you, right? Daniel Steele is a San Francisco, romantic comedy writer. But the point in being is that you said the same thing, but you put it in someone else's mouth. So you tell the woman you like Daniel Steele said, I love you. So you didn't say it, you indirectly say it, and then it hinted, well, this guy likes who I am by citing something, and that's actually what the dating game is today. This is why you have people like Rouge Fee writes his book on game or pickup artistry, because you're beating around the bush constantly to make hints, to say something you want, but if you were too direct, it would also cause, you have to make the bodies speak, then you do the minds. And of course, it's very insincere, but this is why, people they're not confident. They don't know what they want. But if people were deadly confident, they would be sincere with their actions. But again, I think we're living in a very ironic time, and irony really doesn't help people in the end. It just destroys relationships because there's no commitment to sincerity. And I think sincerity is what people look for. It's the same sincerity that what Socrates was talking to Alcibiades with. And it's the same sincerity you have in a Bushwick house with your rack synthesizers, a cuddle party, being nudist, and all that fun stuff.
It's very poetic. I agree.
Right.
I agree. Irony
Right.
is gone quite far in past
And
few
if people
years.
were much happier, they wouldn't be sad and depressed and angry, right?
Yeah.
We're living a very time where people are angry, upset, relationships are all-time low. It's because they're not educated enough. I know I sound like a liberal here, but it's like not that I'm saying people have to know these things, but it's true. There should be a paternal force and manifestation of virtue ethics of right and wrong, and to know this is the light here, this is the path. I mean, this is why we have religion and things like that. And yet, it's hard to find the good person that's willing to help. This is why we have straight edge.
Yeah.
Straight edge with a counter attack against all the drugs and promiscuous sex and decadence you would probably see in New York City that happens like a dirty serial killer rape dungeon. And I have daily PTSD, but I control it and I classify myself as straight edge. But most people don't know how to do that because they haven't seen it yet. And that's upholding ethics. Because again, I personally believe that liberalism never finds disgust because it believes in freedom, right? It believes in too much freedom and nothing is disgusting. It only finds disgust if you break the value system of liberalism, like players in a game. And they think their paternalism is more important to say, well, you can't be in the liberal society because you don't know how to play a game. And that's usually liberal defense. But the irony is they allow you to do anything without disgust. And I just want to say one more thing, too, is that disgust is good because if you find something disgusting, you know not to associate with these people and you know that something needs to change, right?
Yeah.
And that ideal is important to the standards of ethics. It's like, how come in the world that the eventual liberal end game is okay with things like homosexuality when, they don't have children? Right? You can't have children. It's not biologically possible. They might have gay sex, whatever, that's fine, whatever, but you're not going to have kids. You're all going to have AIDS and die, like Randy Schultz and the band Played On, right? Yeah. You can have gay lifestyles, but it's like that is, along with, I'm going to say this, liberals saying that pedophilia is minor attracted people. Person, a map is now, a virtuous pedophile, right? That's right, we know it's child abuse, right? But they'll call it minor attracted person, or like zoophilia, not bestiality. So again, I'm going to say something really crazy here. Homosexuality, pedophilia, and zoophilia are paraphilias, meaning that they don't produce. They have desires, which can be rational, but, and it's very analytical here, I'm not justifying child abuse or animal abuse. What I'm saying is, I'm saying is all these things can't produce because of some biological realities. How come is it that Asian sexuality, what I'm mentioning, or the guy who likes Asian women, is considered a fetish and problematic? And as I was saying before, why do they find Asian sexuality disgusting, but not homosexuality, pedophilia, and zoophilia? See, the ladders are forms of paraphilia. And I've mentioned this joke before too. Tim Rogers, video game journalist, 2014, wrote an article why he was an Asian sexual, why he liked Japanese women, but he wrote it in such a weird way where he was like, well, my penis has been in Japanese vaginas, so what? They happen to be Japanese. What are you talking about? And he was basically veneering his Asian sexuality as if he was queer. And I've done the Safe Sleazy video in this before. See, Asian sexuality is only justified if you're a queer person because the liberal creates a self-destructive racism when it assumes, and I've heard this before, this is what Tim Rogers said before, I only like Asian women because they look like men. What? It's like you're not understanding the petite nature and the beauty of a woman, and you're saying if I like an Asian woman, I'm a gay guy, and guess what? Sam Hyde of World Peace used that same argument in How to Bomb the World Government and said, if you like Asian women, you're one, a pedophile or a homosexual. Why? It doesn't make any sense. And guess what? The other weird child abuse claims I get, well, this guy who's an Asian woman, he's a pedophile. Oh, that sounds like problematic on your behalf because you're assuming anyone who likes Asian women is a pedophile. And you kill two birds with one stone by saying, if that's the case, then I might as well be an ethno-nationalist and a solipsist society to support white nationalism. See, it gets really tricky, the rhetoric here. Yeah. Because the dialogue is made sure to make sure you don't question these things. And again, I'm not bashing gay people. I've known a white guy and his Asian boyfriend, and they're doing fine, okay? A gay sleazy and his Korean twink is a thing, and they mog everyone at Mood Ring. It's okay. Doesn't matter if they have a kid. Asian sexuality is still there, even if they're gay. Now, what I am saying is that there's an accusation that gay people are only into gay Asian men because they're pedophiles, right? They're not abusing anyone. We have a natural leaning towards what is good in this world, and that has nothing to do with child abuse or animal abuse. And animal abuse, and I've read really crazy shit. I think Nick Land retweeted this. He found a funny article titled "A Zoophilia's Guide to Speedrunning Super Mario 64."
That's funny.
And I thought it was hilarious. Outsider was tweeting that because it's funny. Like a sincere dude who has sex with animals and plays Super Mario 64. It's very transgressive, but it's just like, yeah, of course Nick Land would retweet that. He's laughing his ass off. But again, to have sex with something and to not produce kids misses the point that one is doing a manifestation of natalism and is causing families, which does not cause disgust. Because remember, this argument is about disgust, right?
Yeah.
It is disgust. Abuse is disgusting. It is disgusting if I'm in a Long Island bar and I see some girl snorting cocaine in the corner. That's disgusting. It's rape, okay? I believe in Andrea Dorgan. It is disgusting when you see someone do drugs. It is disgusting if there's these weird hookup date rapes that happen and then they get abused and they say, don't talk to me ever again, the next wife, or I'll call SA on you. That is disgusting. It's also disgusting for someone to, just be in the down and just hurt themselves or something. And and that's the whole point of straight edge. And a lot of normies can't fathom this. They don't want to have that thoughts because they just want to go to church and Lake Tahoe or something like that. But again, I think I was just making a big digression there to tell you some of the problems why people criticize me, but I don't think those are criticisms. Yeah. I think they're not real criticisms because what it is slander to uphold the liberal system because the liberals are mad that the ideology of sameness is falling apart, because if the ideology of sameness was to continue, they will justify pedophilia and bestiality as minor attracted people or zoophilia in the same structure with gay people. And guess what? You might as well take the Tim Rogers route and raise the yellow flag and say Asian sexuality is homosexuality. I've been meaning to write this article, but no. Asian sexuality is not sexuality is not homosexuality, zoophilia, or pedophilia. And if you make those claims, it is totally not. And by the way, there's rumors going around that Sam Hyde has a half Japanese kid or aborted it. That tells you a lot about his stance right now with Sam Hyde and how he's a hypocrite. But yeah.
No, I thank you for that digression. I actually, that was great. Yeah. Lastly, I think we're gonna wrap up here, but
yeah, sorry.
I wanted to just follow up or to see you have a show coming up in New York kind of soon. Would you like to talk anything about that?
Oh yeah, so I don't know if you know Expat Press.
I don't.
They want to advertise too, and I wrote a little satirical Safe Sleazy was writing it too. I will be having a DJ/reading event / book sale event starting at 8:00 in Lower Houston, downtown Manhattan, at this one little bar. A lot of people from the meme pages coming up, but a lot of people from post Dime Square is showing up.
So post Dime Square, yeah.
So there's a lot of, and remember, I'm not a Republican. I want to put that out there. I'm not a Republican, though I voted Donald Trump 3 times. I will admit that. I voted Donald Trump 3 times because that was common sense and I believed in saving the nation. But I am not a Republican. Just want to make that out there clear. And here's the thing. We're having an event where a lot of the post-Dime Square people are showing up, and people from the meme page, and people who have a intersectional interest in anti-liberalism, and people who like my art. Because there's a lot of people who like my art, and there's a lot of people who do not like my art. And I don't respect the people who do not like my art. I'm probably going to be spinning music, having fun with friends, having there, and then probably at the end I'll give a 15-minute speech of what I'm about, why I thank everyone being here, and just shaking hands and seeing what's happened. That event is being supported by Expat Press and some of my other friends who I've known for a very long time. And just being back in the New York area and all that. And hopefully maybe this might be the sequel to the Hegelian E-Girls. This might be the continuation.
Hegelian E-Girls, yeah.
Right, I'm friends with those people too.
Yeah.
But this kind of continuation where, AXA is ultimately me, okay? It's not like I'm the president, the king of whatever. It's just an art movement like Peter Missing's Missing Foundation, like the Martini Glass and things like that. And I just want to have a like-minded aesthetics. I don't want to support any far-right agenda. I want to express myself as an artist, and I'm very open-minded about criticisms of the liberal state, which is a very different thing, okay? And I know there's a lot of irony guys and this kind of edgy people who are just trolly. I don't like those people at all. And I have zero tolerance for people like I know, like I don't want to say names, but I don't like them. I've blocked them on X. If they come,
Yeah.
well, I don't want to confront them. Easy as I'm straight edge. I believe in standards, and that's just the way it is. And listen, I don't want to put. I just want to be an artist. I want to network. I want to show my books and my tapes and have all good things because again, there's a lot of people in New York who know who I am. And I just want to be on good terms and all that fun stuff. And hopefully, the point of this is to let people know what AXA is and the whole subculture, the punk rock, post Asian American subculture is, and just giving light to a system where the boomer generation and Gen X is falling apart. And you got to get ready for Millennial and Z, who does not give a fuck about the Puritan ethic anymore. So, yeah.
Sweet. If it says free entry, so I may show up if it's
Yeah,
available
well, I
to the
just want a
public.
heads up. I don't think I'll be selling my books. I'm just going to lay all my books and my tapes on the table, and it's free to grab.
Sounds great.
So by the first 30 minutes, I think 10 people are just going to pick it up, and then somebody's like, you have any books? They were free, so they all took it up. So that's the only part. I think everybody else who's going to sell a book will sell their book, unless I want to talk to them. If they want to sell the book, they might sell the book, but I was thinking it would just be free. So just like James T. Chick, weird Bible stuff, just pick it up. It's the gospel, and then talk to me afterward because I just want to talk to people,
Yeah.
Yeah. Are there people probably going to jump me? No. But if they are, I think they belong to far right persuasions and they're basically angry skinheads. And I don't like those people at all. So, yeah.
All right. Well, I guess we're reaching the end of time again. Thank you again, pilleater.
Right. Thank you, Aiden.
Yeah. This probably. I'm not sure if this is gonna, be released or anything. I'll let you know if it will be. Most likely, it's just gonna be in the.
If you give the audio to your professor or whatever, or write a paper, that's all good. You're passing your class. So I've done the same thing before.
Yeah. I hope to talk to you again, or maybe I'll come to this event of yours.
If you can, 100%.
Yeah.
I'm in the city myself. I'm not getting my location, but I'm around town, and just come to this. It's in Manhattan.
Gotcha.
I'll post a flyer in a few days just to remind people, and I think we got the venue. I don't think we need to do a last minute venue change. It's here. It's gonna be good. So yeah.
Sweet. Well, have a good rest of your Monday, and
I hope to see you soon. Okay, man.
yeah. Thank you again. Have a good one.
All right. See you then.